Welcome back to part 4. The first thing we're going to do before we do anything else is we're going to make our fox's nose, because if you've watched any of my tutorials before, you'll know that we always put the nose in place first before we put any of the other facial features into place. So I'm going to move my fox out the way. I'm going to take some black wool bats here, and this strip here is measuring 6 inches by just under 1 inch in width. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold the top piece of this wool, the sort of the scraggy ends of the wool, over so I've got more of a straight line here. Then I'm going to take this side here and I'm going to fold it on an angle like so, and then I'm going to fold it downwards. So we're creating this kind of triangular shape, okay? Then with this open end here, I'm going to fold it over, and then I'm going to fold it over again. So we're forming this kind of triangular shape for our fox's nose. I think that's actually probably enough. I'm just going to take these loose ends here, fold them over the top, hold it down with my finger, and then with my fine twisted needles, I'm just going to tack that down so it can't unravel. Like so. Now this is a little big at the moment, we want to make it a bit smaller, so I'm going to felt this down to a size that I think is proportionate for our fox's head. And it depends on the kind of look that you want to go for. If you want to go for a more realistic look, then absolutely you want to make your nose to be as proportionate as possible and realistic as possible size-wise with the size of your fox's head. But if you're going for a more cartoony look, you could either go super small or you go super large. It really is up to you. But I'm going to go, I would like to kind of err on the side of almost like a Pixar-y kind of looking creature. So I kind of go maybe a little bit oversized, but not too oversized. So all I'm doing here is just felting the sides down on an angle, just to tighten those up. And then just on this side. And you want to get to the stage where your nose is looking something like this. Now, the size of the nose that I've made, I'm going to use centimetres here because it's obviously quite small. I'm going to have to do this on the other end because it's all rubbed off on my other end, so it's a bit confusing because it's got 150 on it, but it's about 1.5 centimetres in length and then about just over 1 centimetre in its width. So I've got my flatter, larger end here, and then I've got my 2 triangular parts here that kind of taper downwards to the point. So I'm going to bring my fox back in, and I'm going to place his nose around about, I'm just going to hold him on the side just to see where it sits. About here, I'm going to place it. I'm going to take my fine needles, and initially I'm just going to hold there with my finger and my nail protecting my finger. And then I'm just going to hold it down again, and I'm just going to tack those sides down initially. I'm not going to do too much on the centre at the moment. Just use light stabbing movements. Don't go too deep because you'll end up skewering the nose and it'll be like a kebab on your needles. So just use light stabbing motions. Okay, I'm just making sure it's all nice and central. It's a little bit on the wonk. Just move that over a bit. Don't stab down the centre too much because we don't want to flatten the shape that we've created. So try and stick to felting almost on a diagonal. So you're going in the side and then felting down towards the centre of the inside of the nose, rather than going straight down the middle and undoing all your hard work with the shaping. We're going to continue to shape as we go, but we don't want to lose anything that we've already put in place. So that looks pretty good. I'm happy that that's nice and central. Still looks a bit odd, but fear not, it's going to all come into place very nicely. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my red wool bats and I'm just going to take up a couple of strips. So I've got a strip here that measures 7 inches by just over 1 inch. And I'm going to split this in half. That. So I've got 2 equal size pieces here, equal lengths, equal widths, roughly there or thereabouts. I'm going to take my first piece and I'm going to do what we did with our black a moment ago. I'm going to create this kind of triangular shape, but not quite as thick. So I'm going to fold over that end. So we've got a nice flat end, fold over the corner. This is going to be to create our fox's muzzle. One more there. I think one more and that will be enough. So I'm just going to tuck that end in there and I'm just going to felt that down so it can't come undone. Okay, so that's the first one and then the same with the second. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just give us a squeeze. 6, that'll be enough. So 6 rolls I've done there. And again, just stab it down. There we go. So I've got 2 pieces there that are roughly the same thickness and the same size. I'm going to bring my fox back in and we're going to place these on the angles of where his nose is. So around about here and here. And that's going to create a bit more shaping for his mouth in a moment. So I'm going to take my first one. I'm just going to have a fiddle and make sure I'm going to get it in the right position. There we go, I think probably there. So I'm going to felt that down. So I'm felting again along the edges, not down the middle at the moment, just to get it tacked down. And the nice thing with this wool is it blends in very easily because it's very short fibres that make up the wool bats. If it was long fibres, it would be a lot more tricky to blend everything in as smoothly, but this works like a treat. It's really easy to blend. So again, doing the same on this side, just felting down the edges. And then try and get this nice and smooth if you can. Try and blend it in with the rest of the face. So concentrate a little bit of the felting down around those sides. Just going to felt down that middle part as well a little bit. And a little bit down the centre as well, just to lose a little bit of that height. There we go. So they're added. So the next thing we need to do now is cover those over. So I'm going to go back to my red wool. I'm going to take a small section. I'm just going to pull it slightly. It's a bit too much there. And we want it to be almost opaque. And I'm going to make it large enough so it's covering both of these triangular sections that we've just added. I'm going to place it over the top. And then very gently, I'm just going to felt that over those 2 triangular pieces that are going to form our fox's mouth. So starting off around that chin and neck area. paring away that excess. I don't want too much going over our nose at the moment. I'm just going to blend that all in to his face. Using my fine needles still, not using my medium needles at all here, because we want it to be nice and smooth without too much indentation left. Okay, and then I'm just going to add a little bit more, just to give a little bit more coverage. So I'm going to go back to my wool and then just put a little bit more over the top. Again, you want it to be relatively almost opaque in the amount of thickness that you have. Again, just place it over the top and then just felt that down. We want to do this gradually. We don't want it to do it in one big lump, because the minute you add it in one big lump, you might have too much. And then it's really difficult to blend everything in, and you might end up with loads of lumpiness and it being unshapely around his mouth area. By adding it gradually, it just means that we have control over how it's looking a bit more, rather than going in really quickly with loads and loads of wool. So I'll come back to you in a second once I've felted down the second piece. I'll see you in a moment. Right, so I've added that second piece, and your mouth should look something like this. So it looks a bit like this on the side profile, and then from the front it looks like this. So the next thing we need to do is we need to add his eyes. So what I want to do now is just use my squeezing technique that I like to use to think about where I want to place our fox's eyes. So I think here might look quite good, it might look quite natural. So I'm going to take my fine needles and I'm just going to felt a little divot either side. It's always good to look at it front on when you're using your fingers to press this in, because that way you get a much more even and symmetrical looking eye. And it's always good to look at your sculpture straight on when you're doing anything like this, and then put your fingers in at the same time, and that way you can see that it's nice and symmetrical and the eyes are evenly balanced, rather than one being up there and one being down there if you were to do it like this. Okay, so always look at it head on. And then I'm just going to take my needles. I'm happy with that. I think that looks quite good. So I'm just going to felt a deeper divot into where his eye is going to sit. And the same on the other side. And you want to get this divot relatively deep because we want our eyes to sit inside the sculpture. We don't want them to be on the top, on the surface, because it takes away from the magic then, from the almost realisticness of the sculpture. And I'm not saying that this looks like a realistic fox, because it doesn't, but you know, in terms of if you were going to look at a toy or something like that, and it has the appearance that it could come to life at any moment, that's the kind of look I want to go for. Okay, so they're looking pretty good. So I'm going to go back to my black wool bats now. I'm going to take a couple of small pinches, like so. It's a bit smaller on that side, like that, and I'm just going to roll them between my fingers. Just have a feel to make sure they feel equal. This one feels like it's a little bit less. I'm just going to go back in and just take a pinch more. There we go. And then I'm just going to go in with my single medium cross star needle now, and I'm just going to felt those black balls that we've just made into our eye sockets. And I'm kind of felting straight down the center, but also moving my needles around the edge just to get it nice and deeply inset. Okay, so that's one eye added. I'm just going to go ahead and add the second eye. So same thing, put the black in there and then just use your needles to felt it down. Moving my needle around just to get a nice even felt over the whole eye and make sure it contracts nicely into the hole that we've made, so we get a nice even eye and it looks the same on this side as it does on the other side. And also we want to just get rid of any looseness so nothing can unravel or catch. We just want to get it nice and deeply inset into his head. Okay, they look pretty good. They look about the same. So the next thing I want to do is start thinking about shaping his eye. This is a really simple technique that I like to use all the time if I'm going to create some kind of cute animal eye. So we're going to take our needle and we're going to push our black wool that we've just added up into the inner upper part of our head, like so. Okay, I'm just going to go a bit more, just to get a definite shape going there. Then I'm going to do the same on the other side. Then I'm going to do the same on the other side. So again, just pushing, just going to make sure that it's looking equal. Okay, that's good. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this side down, so the outer bottom corner out and downwards. Like so. So it's almost kind of arcing down a little bit like that. And then the same on this side. So just catching that black wool and we're pushing it downwards. So we're maneuvering it into the areas that we want it to sit. Okay, that looks good. Spin him around to this side. Okay, so he looks like that. So we've got his eyes in place. Now the next thing we want to do is start to really put some life into his. The next thing we want to do is really put some life into his eyes and some light. So I'm going to go back to my white wool. So I've got my white wool bats here, so I'm going to just pull away some of that. So I've got this strip here, and I'm going to tear this in half, going with the fibres, like so. And then I'm just going to halve it again. So we've got a small amount, so 2 pieces like this. I'm going to take my first piece, and I'm going to roll it between my fingers. And I'm going to place it just at the bottom of our eye. And I'm going to take my medium needle, and I'm very gently just going to felt this into the bottom of our black that we've just added. So it's going onto the black, not onto the red fox wool. Okay, like that. I'm going to take my embroidery scissors, and I'm going to cut away those excess pieces, mainly so I can see what I'm doing a bit better. And I'm just going to felt that down. We want more to be on the outside than we do on the inside, okay, as well. So it's kind of creating this waterline for our fox's eye. So you definitely want to use a single needle for this part. Don't try and use the double needle felting pen, because you'll have a complete nightmare trying to shape it with 2 needles. So just use a single needle here. Okay. And then what I want to do is this inner part here, I want that to blend in a bit more and almost disappear into the eye. So I'm just going to felt that into our red fox wool a bit more. And then just felt that into a line, like so. So what I want to do is I actually want to add a little bit more to this edge here. So I'm going to take one of those pieces that we've just trimmed away, because it's already rolled, and I'm just going to place that into that corner, and again felt that down. If you end up with any naughty strands, just grab your embroidery scissors and just trim them away. There we go. Just going to have a look at that. I think I just want to touch more, so I'm just going to go and take that second piece, and I'm just going to again add that in too. So I like a nice full waterline on my cute animal sculptures. I think it just really adds a whole new level of cuteness to them. Okay, there we go. So first one done. Then let's do the second one. So back to our piece of wool. I'm going to roll it between my fingers. I'm actually going to cut this a bit more because this is far too long. And then I'm just going to place it again at the bottom of our eye, and I'm going to felt that down. And I'll be back with you in a second once I've got this one felted into place as well. Right, so we've added the waterline. So the next thing we want to do is add in some pupils to our fox's eyes. So I'm going to go back to my white. I'm going to take just a pinch of white. I'm going to split it in half, and then I'm going to split it in half again. So I've got 2 very small pieces. I'm going to roll them between my fingers until all of the fibres are combined, like so. Okay, so they're really tiny. And I'm going to place them just in the upper inner corner of the eye, and then I'm going to take my medium needle again, and I'm just going to felt that into position. And I'm going to focus on getting it nice and circular, and I'm going to do that by focusing mainly on felting straight down the center part of our pupil, but also just doing very light stabbing motions. So you can see here, I'm not going in, I'm doing this, just to get everything nice and neat, felted down, but not too felted, because otherwise you'll lose your eye. It will end up going into the black and it'll disappear. So we don't want to go too heavy-handed here. So that's looking good. So I'm just going to go on the other side and do the same thing, making sure that it's equal. Again, felting down that centre part there. So it contracts inwards, but not so much that it disappears into the black. That looks good. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is add a bit of light in his eyes now. So I'm going to take one final piece of white. This is going to be even smaller than the last two pieces we added. So that kind of size, which I'm going to roll between my fingers again to create two tiny balls. And then I'm going to place this on an angle going sort of on the bottom outside edge of the pupil we've just added. So about here. So we want to have space between the pupil and the light. We don't want to have them touching because it will take away from the finish. So around about here, and we want it to be about a quarter of the size of the eye we've just added, so about that size. I'm going to do the same with the other side. There we are. So there we go, we've got some light added to our fox's eye now, and he's starting to really come to life and take shape. Very exciting. I think this is one of the most exciting parts about needle felting. We've just taken this stuff, and now we have this, which I think is really exciting. So the next thing we want to do, the next thing that we need to do is we want to shape his face a bit more. Now we've got some features in place, we want to give a bit more shape to his nose. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press inwards, and I'm going to use my fine needles just to press inwards and get a bit more space around his eye and the nose area. So pressing this way. And then I'm going to just lift his nose upwards towards his head. Just felt that down. So we're kind of going like this, okay? And then pressing inwards again. Don't worry about this being narrow, because we're going to add additional wool later to give his face a more fuller look, okay? So don't worry about that. I'm just going to hold him up a second. So what we want to do is get this bit to go inwards a bit more and get a bit more of a flatter part here on his head. So we're really creating some shape to his face. So I'm just going to felt that down. So I'm using my finger just to press that inwards and then just felting it down. And then felting around the back of that head as well. And I'm just felting this line here, again, just to add a bit more additional character and help us form eyebrows and things like that for our fox later on. And I'm just going to felt down some looseness at the back of his head as well that we haven't haven't sorted yet, so I'm just going to get rid of that looseness and make this a bit tighter now. And you'll be able to feel it as you go in. You'll see here it's really soft, so we just want to get this a bit more firm. Not super duper hard, but firm enough that everything is nice and in place and isn't going to start unraveling. We're not going to start getting loads of naughty bits of fibre coming out and things like that. Okay, so we've added his eyes and his nose in now. We've really shaped his face, and you can see we've got this nice long nose on him that we really identify with when we look at a fox. But the next thing we need to do now is add some white to his belly, because as you know, foxes have these white bellies and then it kind of beards up their chin onto their cheeks. So I'm going to get some more of my white Shetland. I'm going to tear off a small piece because he's got quite a small belly, this fox. It's funny with felting, everything always ends up looking a little bit different. Some creatures that I make will have very long torsos and little legs, and then you'll end up with someone like this chap, and he's got very long legs but a very short torso. So no one is the same, they all end up slightly different in the end. So what I'm doing is I'm just felting this down and I'm folding over these edges here just to create this kind of round tummy for him. We want to make sure as well that it's nice and symmetrical, which this is not at the moment. So I'm just going to get a bit more wool and I'm just going to place that here and felt that round so I can work on getting a bit more wool over to this side. So what we want to do is we want to form this kind of circular shape at the bottom, and then as we get to the top we want it to taper inwards, okay? So you're tapering this inwards so it's not completely rounded, because we want to taper it in and then bring it out again onto his cheeks. So I'm just going in with my fine needles and just felting this under his chin. Like so. So he's got this nice cute white belly. Okay, and then I'm going to take a bit more, and then what we're going to do is we're going to work on tapering this out under his chin, so he's got his nice white cheeks and he's got this kind of white underside to his mouth here. So I'm just going to tear little strips off initially, just place it under his chin and felt this down. I'm just going to felt it and tack it down under his mouth for the moment. And then we're going to work on bringing it outwards to his cheeks. Okay. So, and I'm just gonna felt a bit more up here. So we're kind of going right under the nose over that muzzle that we've added. And then we want to work on bringing it round here. So I'm just gonna tilt this down a bit more. I'm going to take a bit more wool and I'm going to bring this over to one side and just bring it outwards a bit, and felt that again into place and going over across his cheek here. And I'm just going to fold over these loose ends just to create more of a definite shape, so it's kind of rounded and kind of goes under his mouth. Don't stab too hard, so it's kind of looking like this, okay? And then I'm just going to go back to my wool and I'm going to take a bit more And we're just going to do the same on the other side, and I'll be back in a minute once it's all felted down. Right, so we've got the base of our white around the fox's mouth. So what we want to do is we want to build on that now. So we're creating a bit more volume, a bit more puffiness around here. So I've got some more of my white wool, and I'm going to tear off some pieces, and I'm going to keep it quite lofty. And I'm just going to place it over his face, and I'm going to take my fine needles and I'm going to tack it down, but I'm not going to really felt it down. I'm going to keep it quite loose. So it's kind of tacked down enough, it's not going to go anywhere, but we're not going to really felt it down so it's all flush with his red coat that we've added. I'm going to keep it so that it's quite puffy, so there's lots of air inside it still. I'm just going to tentatively felt around just to create that impression of fur. There we go. Just felt around that side a bit. So I'm just kind of felting down any really obvious looseness. Okay, I'm just going to go in with a bit more on the other side and do the same kind of thing. I'm going to go up round his cheek. Just going to felt a little bit under his neck because it's a bit loose. Just going to have a look at him, and I'm just going to take my needles down that centre area, that central area where we're going to be adding his mouth in a bit. Just going to add a little bit more on this side because this side's just ever so slightly flatter than the other side. Again, just pop it over. Just keep checking it front on as well, just to make sure everything's looking symmetrical. There we are. So we've got his white, almost kind of beard look underneath his mouth and his neck added and onto his chest. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add his mouth in. So I'm going to go to my brown merino roving wool now, and I'm just going to take a small strip. And you don't really need to measure this because it's more about gauging it with your own eye and what you feel works more than anything, more than sort of precise measurements here. I'm just rolling it between my thumb and my finger again, just to get that kind of rope effect. And I'm just going to place it down the centre of where we want the beginnings of his mouth to be. I'm going to take my single needle, and I'm still using my medium twisted cross star needle here. And I'm just going to lightly tack this in. When you're adding a mouth, make sure that you don't add too much downwards, too much of this bit, because it can look a bit odd sometimes, depending on what kind of look you're going for. But I tend to find if you keep it to about 1 centimetre or just under 1 centimetre, that's usually about the right amount of length you want to go for. Just making sure it's looking symmetrical and not wonky. And then I'm just going to split it down the middle, and then I'm just going to position it roughly where I want his mouth to be, and then I'm going to take my needle and I'm just going to lightly tack this into position. And then I'm just going to cut away the excess with my embroidery scissors, like so. And then once that's cut away, I'm just going to felt that down into the mouth nice and deeply, so it's nice and deeply set. pushing it upwards so he's smiling. And then just using my needles, just maneuver it to get it looking even and equal. And you want to get this bit here pushed upwards as well. You don't want this to be flat because then you'll lose some vital shape from your mouth. There we go. So once that's in place, I'm going to then just add some smile dimples at the very corners. And then the same on the other side. And there we go, there's his mouth in place. I'm just going to give him a bit more of a tack around just to tighten up where it's a little bit too loose around his cheeks and things. There we are. There we are, so his smile is in place. What I want to do next is I just want to focus on felting a little bit more where his eyes are and getting this to more of a point here, getting this a bit narrower. So I'm just going to swap over and use my fine needles now, my fine twisted needles, just to felt that a bit more into each other to create a narrower bridge to his nose there. And also open up the eyes by just pressing downwards as well, so we can see more of his eyes front on. Okay. There we go. So the next thing to do is add in some eyebrows, and that's really going to give him some additional character. So I'm going to go back to my medium cross star twisted needle, and I'm going to tack in like an upside down rainbow just above his eye. And with eyebrows, you can go a bit rogue. You can pretty much do whatever you think works. By doing this kind of upside down rainbow, it gives him this kind of slightly, what's the word I'm looking for? Perturbed look. He looks a bit confused maybe. But I like it because it makes him look quite sweet, I think. Okay, and then I'm just going to do the same on the other side. Another upside down rainbow. And it can take a little while, but be patient with this because you want to get it as straight as possible, the indentation into the wall. What you don't want is it to be all lumpy like this. You want it to have a definite smooth line across his forehead to represent those eyebrows. So you want to take your time to get it neatly felted in. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some lines just down by his eyes. I like to do this because, again, I think it just adds another dimension to our creation and gives him additional character. I don't think it really ages him. It kind of gives him that shape to his face that you'd get if he was smiling. Those little smile lines as opposed to crow's feet. And they're quite subtle, nothing too dramatic. There we go, so he's really taking on his personality now, but we are missing one extremely important feature of our fox, and that is his ears. So we're going to make those next. So I've moved my felting mat out of the way and I've brought my brush mat in. So what we're going to do is take some more of our red wool, and I'm going to make some equal sections here. So we're working with similar sized piles of wool to create his ears. So that's the first pile. And then let's just make the second pile. Get it looking as close as possible to that one. So I'm just tearing off some strips and then just layering them on top of each other. They look about the same. So this is measuring about 2.5 inches by about 4 inches. So I'm going to place this on my mat. So I'm going to take my 7 needle multi-tool and I'm going to felt downwards. But what I'm going to do, rather than with the mouse ears where we felted down this circle, I'm going to felt the point. And I'm going to keep all this area here loose. And I'm just going to fold the sides of the ear in on an angle. And there you go. So we've got our first triangular fox ear. So this is measuring lengthwise about 3.5 inches. At the smallest point, it's about 1/2 inch. And at the widest point, it is about 2.5 inches. So that's our first ear. So then we're going to make the second ear. Same thing, place our wool on the brush mat. And then we want to create this triangular shape. Keeping all this bottom part here nice and loose. And then I'm just going to fold the sides in. And then same on the other side. Just going to work on this bit here, the little point here. They're about roughly the same size. It doesn't matter if one's slightly bigger than the other because we can sort that out when we come to felt it down in a moment. So what I want to do next is I'm going to add the central part to our ear. So I'm just going to tear off some more of my white Gotland wool and just place it roughly in the middle. Same on this side as well. And then we're just going to felt that down. Doesn't have to be perfect. But you want the majority of it. To be quite central into the ear, sort of below, and that will form what will look like the inside of his ear. But we don't want it to be super neat because foxes are quite kind of, well, they just look a bit feral, don't they, and wild. So we want his ears to look kind of natural and wild as opposed to too neat and tidy. So if you've got these little bits here that are kind of blending in with the red wool, that's absolutely fine. Don't worry about that. There we go. So we've got our 2 ears made. So now it's time to attach them. So I've brought my fox back in again and I've got his ears here ready to attach to his head. So the first thing we want to do is take his ear and we want to pinch it at the bottom, like so. So you're creating almost like a cone-like shape at the bottom of his ear. We're going to turn him over and then we're going to just think about where we want to place his ear. So I'm just trying to find the most natural position for it. Probably about here, I think, is a good place to start. So I'm going to press him into my mat really quite firmly. I'm going to hold the ear in place and I'm going to let this part here just splay out. I'm going to take my medium twisted cross star needle And I'm just going to felt that down into his head. So once that's all felted in, I'm going to let go a bit, and then where I've pinched, I'm just going to felt that down to keep that pinch in place, like so. And then once it's kind of tacked down, I can let go, and then I can actually start properly felting it into position, like so. It's always worth checking at this stage to make sure that you're happy with the position of the ear. I think I am. That looks pretty good because I can manipulate it and move it as I go. So I'm just going to flip him back over onto his tummy again. And felt that down a bit more securely. Just go around the back. Careful of here, because here you'll have lots of wire still from your arms. Flip him round. I'm just going to felt a little bit down the centre of his ear as well, just to attach it at the front of his head too, just to make sure that nothing's going to go anywhere. There we are. So that is his first ear added. It's quite a large ear, but I quite like it being nice and large. We could always bend it if we wanted to, but I think he looks quite cool like that. So I'm going to add the second ear now. So I'm going to do the same thing again, pinch at the bottom, and I think probably about here. So again, we'll tack that side down a second. I'm just going to flip him round. Check. Oh no, what's happened? Just reattach it. That's why it's important to check. So there is where we want it. So pressing down into the mat. I'm going to felt where I'm pinching. I'm just going to felt that looseness around the back into the back of his head as well. And then once it's attached, I'm just going to turn him back onto his back, and then I'm just going to work on shaping how his ear looks around the front. Again, I'm just going to felt a little bit down the centre just to get that nicely secured into place so it can't go anywhere. So there we go, his ears are in place. So that was the penultimate part to our finale, which will be tomorrow, where we're going to be adding fur to his tail. So I'm going to teach you the technique in order to create the appearance of fur on his tail. And we're also going to be adding one last wrap to his arms as well, just to integrate that all really nicely in with the body. And we might even make a little bit of a bow tie to go on his neck as well. So I will see you tomorrow for the final part. I hope you've enjoyed today. Please share this with your friends if you think they would find it useful as well, because I'm really keen to get needle felting out there to as many people as possible so they can enjoy it as much as we all love it and enjoy it. I will see you tomorrow for more felting hints and tips. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel, and I will see you soon. Bye.